5 most important skills are reading, writing, arithmetic, persuasion, which is talking, and then finally I would add computer programming. If you're good with computers, if you're good at basic mathematics, the 5 most important skills are reading, writing, arithmetic, persuasion, which is talking, and then finally I would add computer programming. If you're good with computers, if you're good at basic mathematics, if you're good at writing, if you're good at speaking, and if you like reading, you're set for life. You're set for life. You're set for life. You're set for life. To me, foundational things are principles. They're algorithms. They're deep-seated logical understanding where you can defend it or attack it from any angle. That's why microeconomics is important. Because macroeconomics, a lot of memorization, a lot of macro bullshit. As Nassim Taleb says, it is easier to macro bullshit than it is to micro bullshit. Because macroeconomics is voodoo complex science meets politics. You can't find two macroeconomists to agree on anything these days. And different macroeconomists get used by different politicians to peddle their different pet theories. There are even macroeconomists out there now peddling something called modern monetary theory, which basically says, hey, except for this pesky thing called inflation, we can just print all the money that we want. Yes, except for this pesky thing called inflation. That's like saying, instead of limited energy, we can fire rockets off into space all day long. It's just nonsense with the fact that there are people who have macroeconomists in their title and are peddling modern monetary theory. Just tells you that macroeconomics as a so-called science has been corrupted. It's a branch of politics. The 5 most important skills are reading, writing, arithmetic, persuasion, which is talking, and then finally I would add computer programming. If you're good with computers, if you're good at basic mathematics, if you're good at writing, if you're good at speaking, and if you like reading, you're set for life. You're set for life. You're set for life. You're set for life. So if you really want to focus on the foundations, the ultimate foundation are mathematics and logic. If you understand logic and mathematics, then you have the basis for understanding the scientific method. Once you understand the scientific method, then you can understand how to separate truth from falsehood in other fields and other things that you're reading. So be very careful about reading other people's opinions, and even be careful about reading facts, because so-called facts are often just opinions with a veneer around them. What you really are looking for is algorithms. What you're really looking for is understanding. It's better to go through a book really slowly and struggle and stumble and rewind than it is to fly through it quickly and say, well, now I've read 20 books, 30 books, 50 books in the field. It's like Bruce Lee said, I don't fear the man who knows 1,000 kicks and 1,000 punches. I fear the man who's practiced one punch 10,000 times or one kick 10,000 times. It's the understanding that comes through repetition and through usage and through logic and foundation that really makes you a smart thinker. The 5 most important skills are reading, writing, arithmetic, persuasion, which is talking, and then finally I would add computer programming. If you're good with computers, if you're good at basic mathematics, if you're good at writing, if you're good at speaking, and if you like reading, you're set for life. You're set for life. You're set for life. You're set for life. Business to me is bottom of the barrel. There's no actual skill called business. It's too generic of a thing. It's like a skill called relating, like relating to humans. That's not a skill. It's too broad. So a lot of what goes on in business is essentially just anecdotes. They call it case studies, but it's just anecdotes. And they're trying to help you pattern match by throwing lots of data points at you. But the reality is you'll never understand them fully until you're actually in that position yourself. You can always learn better by doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. You can always learn better by doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. Even then, you will find that basic concepts from game theory and psychology and I think mathematics, computers, and logic will serve you much, much better. I would focus on the foundations. I would focus on the science bent. I would develop a love for reading. That is the foundation for your self-education. When it comes to your learning curve, if you want to optimize your learning curve, one of the reasons I don't love podcasts, even though I'm a generator of podcasts, I like to consume my information very quickly. I can read very fast, but I can only listen at a certain speed. And it's hard to go back, it's hard to highlight, it's hard to pinpoint snippets and save them in your notebook. A lot of people think they can become really skilled at something by watching others do it, or even by reading about others doing it. You're going to learn a lot more by operating your own lemonade stand. That is how you're going to learn on the job, because a lot of the subtleties don't express themselves until you're actually running the business. You know, I've learned that tit for tat, iterated prisoner's dilemma, is the piece of game theory that is worth knowing the most. The best way to learn game theory is to play lots of games. I never even read game theory books. I consider myself extremely good at game theory. I've never opened up a game theory book and found a result in there where I was like, oh yeah, that's common sense. I just grew up playing all kinds of games, and so it's just second nature to me. You can always learn better by doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. You can always learn better by doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. You can always learn better by doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. You can always learn better by doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. The doing is a subtle thing. That word doing encapsulates a lot. If I start a business where I go in every day and I'm doing the same thing, let's say I'm running the retail store down the street, stocking the shelves with food and liquor every single day, I'm not going to learn that much from repeating things a lot. So I'm putting in thousands of hours. There are thousands of hours doing the same thing. Thousands of iterations, that would be different. The learning curve is across iteration. If I was trying new marketing, changing out the inventory, branding and the messaging, changing the sign, the number of iterations that drive the learning curve. The more iterations, the more shots on goal, the faster you're going to learn. It's not just about the hours put in. The way we're built, the way the world presents itself, offers us very easily the opportunity to do the same thing over and over. But really, we'd be better served if we went off and found ways to do new things. Doing something new the first time is painful, and high odds are that you will fail. So you just have to get very, very comfortable with frequent small failures. You just have to get very, very comfortable with frequent small failures. You can always learn better by doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. You can always learn better by doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. You can always learn better by doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. You can always learn better by doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. By doing it on the job. Made his wealth by being a trader. He relied upon black swans, losing little bits of money every day. And then once in a blue moon, he would make a lot when the unthinkable happened for other people. Most people want to make little bits of money every day. In exchange, they'll tolerate lots of low risk. They'll tolerate going completely bankrupt. We're not evolved to that is, by the way, entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs bleed every day. They're not making money. They're losing money. They're constantly stressed out. All the responsibilities upon them. But when they win big. On average, they'll make more.
Embrace accountability and take business risks under your own name. Society will reward you with responsibility, equity, and leverage.
To get rich, you're going to need leverage. Leverage comes in labor, it comes in capital, or it can come through code or media. But most of these, like labor and capital, people have to give to you. For labor, somebody has to follow you. For capital, somebody has to give you money or assets to manage or machines. So to get these things, you have to build up credibility, and you have to do those under your own name as much as possible, which is risky. So accountability is a double-edged thing. It allows you to take credit when things go well and to bear the brunt of the failure when things go badly. But you take risk. That's right. Risk. So you take risk of failure, risk of humiliation. You take risk of failure under your own name. You take risk. That's right. Risk. And the people who have the ability to fail in public under their own names gain a lot of power. People stamping their names on things aren't foolish. They're just confident. By putting your name out there, you become a celebrity. And fame has many, many downsides. It's better to be anonymous and rich than poor and famous, but even famous and rich has a lot of downsides associated with it. You're always in the public eye. A lot of our training socially is telling us to not stick our necks out of the crowd. The tall poppy gets cut. Don't stick your neck out. But clear accountability is important. Without accountability, you don't have incentives. Without accountability, you can't build credibility. You take risk. That's right. Risk. So you take risk of failure, risk of humiliation. You take risk of failure under your own name. You take risk. Risk. And the people who have the ability to fail in public under their own names gain a lot of power. There's no more debtor's prison. People don't go to jail or get executed for losing other people's money, but we're still socially hardwired to not fail in public under our own names. Up until about 2013, 2014, my public persona was entirely around startups and investing, and only around 2014, 2015 did I start talking about philosophy and psychological things, and it made me a little nervous because I was doing it under my own name. People in the industry sent me messages like, what are you doing? You're ending your career. This is stupid. And I kind of just went with it. I took a risk. Same with crypto early on. I took a risk. But when you put your name out there, you take a risk, you also get to reap the reward. You get the benefits. People take risks. Take a risk. Take a risk. Risk. You take a risk with certain things, you get to reap the rewards and the benefits. You take risk. That's right. Risk. So you take risk of failure, risk of humiliation. You take risk of failure under your own name. You take risk. Risk. And the people who have the ability to fail in public under their own names gain a lot of power. Accountability has a lot of power. My own name has a lot of power. Accountability is powerful. Confidence. People take risks. Take a risk. Take a risk. Reap the rewards. And benefits. Accountability has a lot of power. My own name has a lot of power. Accountability is powerful. can't blame it on the steward or the stewardess. You can't blame it on the co-pilot. You're the captain. You're responsible for this ship. You can't blame it on the steward or the stewardess. You can't blame it on the co-pilot. You're the captain. You're responsible for this ship. Accountability. Accountability. Accountability is important because that's how you're going to get leverage. That's how you're going to get credibility. It's also how you're going to get equity. You're going to get a piece of the business. When you're negotiating with other people, ultimately, if someone else is making a decision about how to compensate you, that decision will be based on how replaceable you are. If you have high accountability, that makes you less replaceable, and then they have to give you equity, which is a piece of the upside. But equity itself is a good example because equity is also a risk-based instrument. Equity means you get paid everything after all the people who need guaranteed money are paid back. So if you look at the hierarchy of capital in a company, the employees get paid first. They get to pay the salary first. Like in the legal proceedings, the salaries are sacrosanct. If you are a board member and the company spends too much money and has back salaries to pay, the government will go after you personally to pay back the salaries. So the employees get the most security. But in exchange for that security, they don't have as much upside. You can't blame it on the steward or the stewardess. You can't blame it on the co-pilot. You're the captain. You're responsible for this ship. You can't blame it on the steward or the stewardess. You can't blame it on the co-pilot. You're the captain. You're responsible for this ship. Accountability. 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 And next in line would be the debt holders, who are maybe the bankers who lend money to the company for operations, and they need to make their fixed coupon every month or every year, but they don't get much more upside beyond that. Now, they might be making 5, 10, 15, 20, 25% a year, but that's where their upside is limited to. And then finally are the equity holders. And these people are actually going to get most of the upside. So once the debt holders are paid off and the salaries are paid off, whatever remains goes to them. But if there isn't enough money to pay off the salaries and the debt holders, or if there's just enough to pay off the salary and the debt holders, which is what happens with most businesses most of the times, the equity holders get nothing. So the equity holders take on greater risk, but in exchange they get nearly unlimited upside. And you can do the same with all of your work. So essentially, taking accountability for your actions is the same as taking an equity position in all of your work. You're essentially taking greater downside risk and greater upside risk. But realize that in modern society, the downside risk is not that large. People will forgive failures as long as you are honest and made a high integrity effort. And so people should be taking on a lot more accountability than they actually are. You can't blame it on the steward or the stewardess. You can't blame it on the co-pilot. You're the captain. You're responsible for this ship. You can't blame it on the steward or the stewardess. You can't blame it on the co-pilot. You're the captain. You're responsible for this ship. Accountability. 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 An example of accountability is you're an airplane pilot. As a captain, you're taking on accountability for the entire plane. Let's say that something goes wrong with the aircraft, you can't later blame it on anyone else. You can't blame it on the steward or the stewardess. You can't blame it on the co-pilot. You're the captain. You're responsible for the ship. If you screw up, you crash the ship, and there are immediate consequences. In the old days, the captain was expected to go down with the ship. If the ship was sinking, literally the last person who got to get off was the captain. I think of accountability as reputational skin in the game. It's putting your personal reputation on the line as skin in the game. Accountability is a simple concept. The only part of accountability that may be a little counterintuitive is that we're currently socially brainwashed to not take on accountability. Is that we're currently socially brainwashed to not take on accountability. Not in a visible way. But I think there are ways to take on accountability where every member of a team can take on accountability for their portion. That is how you get a well-functioning team while still putting credits and losses in the correct columns.
fortunes require leverage. Business leverage comes from capital, people, and products with no marginal cost of replication.
Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the earth. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the earth. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the earth. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand.
Leverage is critical. We all know what leverage is when we use a seesaw or a lever. We understand how that works physically. But I think what our brains aren't really well evolved to comprehend is how much leverage is possible in modern society and what the newest forms of leverage are. The oldest form of leverage is labor, which is people working for you. So instead of me lifting rocks, I can have 10 people lift rocks. Then just by my guidance and where the rocks should go, a lot more rocks get moved than I could do myself. Everybody understands this because we're evolved to understand the labor form of leverage.
Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the earth. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the earth. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the earth. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand.
And so what happens is society overvalues labor as a form of leverage. This is why your parents are impressed when you get a promotion and you have lots of people working underneath you. This is why when a lot of naive people, when you tell them about your company, they'll say how many people work there. They'll use that as a way to establish credibility. They're trying to measure how much leverage and impact you actually have. We just automatically assume that more people is better. But I would argue that this is the worst form of leverage that you could possibly use. Managing other people is incredibly messy. It requires tremendous leadership skills. You're one short hop from a mutiny or getting eaten or torn apart by the mob. It's incredibly competed over. Entire civilizations have been destroyed over this fight. For example, communism, Marxism, is all about the battle between capital and labor. Das Kapital und das Labor, right? So it's kind of a trap. So you really want to stay out of labor-based leverage. You want the minimum amount of people working with you that are going to allow you to use the other forms of leverage, which are much more interesting.
Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the earth. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the earth. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the earth. Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand.
is capital. A powerful form of leverage is capital. Is capital. Is capital. And this one's a little less hardwired into us because large amounts of money moving around and being saved and being invested in money markets, these are inventions of human beings the last few hundred to few thousand years. They're not evolved with us from hundreds of thousands of years. So we understand them a little bit less well. They probably require more intelligence to use correctly, and the ways in which we use them keep changing. Management skills from 100 years ago might still apply today, but investing in the stock market skills from 100 years ago probably don't apply to the same level today. So capital is a trickier form of leverage to use. It's more modern. It's the one that people have used to get fabulously wealthy in the last century. It's probably been the dominant form of leverage in the last century. And you can see this by who are the richest people. It's bankers, politicians in corrupt countries who print money, essentially people who move large amounts of money around. And if you look at the top of very large companies, outside of technology companies, many large old companies, the CEO job is really a financial job. They're really financial asset managers. Deep down, I think we all dislike capital as a form of leverage because it feels unfair. Because it's this invisible thing that can be accumulated and passed across generations and suddenly seems to result in people having gargantuan amounts of money with nobody else kind of around them or necessarily sharing in it. A powerful form of leverage is capital. Is capital. Is capital. A powerful form of leverage is capital. Is capital. Is capital. That said, capital is a powerful form of leverage. It can be converted to labor. It can be converted to other things. It's very surgical, very analytical. If you are a brilliant investor and you have $1 billion, you can make a 30% return with it, whereas anybody else can only make a 20% return. You're going to get all the money and you're going to get paid very handsomely for it. It scales very well. If you get good at managing capital, you can manage more and more capital much more easily. You can manage more and more people. So it is a good form of leverage, but the hard part with capital is how do you obtain it? And that's why I talked about specific knowledge and accountability first. If you have specific knowledge in a domain, and if you're accountable and you have a good name in that domain, then people are going to give you capital as a form of leverage that you can use to then go get more capital. A powerful form of leverage is capital. Is capital. Is capital. A powerful form of leverage is capital. Is capital. Is capital. The most interesting and the most important form of leverage is this idea of products that have no marginal cost of replication. This is the new form of leverage. This is only invented in the last few hundred years. It got started with the printing press. It accelerated broadcast media, and now it's really blown up with the internet and with code. So now you can multiply your efforts without having to involve other humans and without needing money from other humans. This song is a form of leverage. This album is a form of leverage. Long ago, I would have had to sit in a lecture hall and lecture each of you personally, and I would have maybe reached a few hundred people, and that would have been that. 30 years ago, I would have to be lucky to get on TV, which is somebody else's leverage. They would have distorted the message, they would have taken the economics out of it or charged me for it. They would muddle the message, and I Today, thanks to the internet, I can buy a cheap microphone, hook it up to a laptop or an iPad, and there you are, all listening. This is leverage. This is leverage. This is leverage. There you are, all listening. This is leverage. This is leverage. This is leverage. There you are, all listening. This newest form of leverage is where all the new fortunes are made. All the new billionaires. The last generation, fortunes were made by capital, but the new generation, fortunes are all made through code or media. Now the beauty is when you combine all of these three. That's where tech startups really excel, where you take just the minimum but highest output labor that you can get, which are engineers and designers, product developers, and then you add in capital. You use that for marketing, advertising, scaling, and you add in lots of code and media and podcasts and content to get it all out there. That is a magic combination, and that's why you see technology startups explode out of nowhere, use massive leverage, and just make huge outsized returns. This is leverage. This is leverage. This is leverage. There you are, all listening. This is leverage. This is leverage. This is leverage. There you are, all listening. The most interesting thing about the new forms of leverage is they are permissionless. For labor leverage, somebody has to decide to follow you. For capital leverage, somebody has to give you money to invest or turn into a product. But coding, writing books, recording podcasts, these kinds of things, these are permissionless. You don't need anyone's permission to do them. This is leverage. This is leverage. This is leverage. There you are, all listening. This is leverage. This is leverage. This is leverage. There you are, all listening. This song, this album, this I think of all the forms of leverage, the best one in modern society, and people go, this is glib, this is overused, and this is why I tell people, learn to code. We have this idea that in the future, there's going to be these robots, and they're going to be doing everything. And that may be true, but I would say the majority of the robot revolution has already happened. The robots are already here, and there are way more robots than there are humans. It's just that we pack them in data centers for heat and efficiency reasons. Put them in servers, they're inside the computers, all the circuits, the robot mind inside that's doing all the work. And so every great software developer, for example, now has an army of robots working for him at nighttime while he or she sleeps. The robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. The robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. The robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. The robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. About halfway through it, We're just adding in much more of the hardware component these days. As we get more familiar, we get more comfortable with the idea of autonomous vehicles and autonomous airplanes and autonomous ships and autonomous trucks and delivery bots and Boston Dynamics robots and all that. But robots who are doing web searching for you are already here. Cleaning up your video and audio are already here. Answering customer service queries that you would have had to call a human for are already here. An army of robots is already here. It's very cheaply available. The bottleneck is just figuring out intelligent and interesting things to do to them. So the robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. The robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. The robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. The robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. You can order this army of robots around. Just the commands have to be issued in the language that they understand. So these robots aren't very smart. They have to be told very precisely what to do and how to do it. So coding is such a great superpower. Now you can speak the language of the robot army and you can tell them what to do. Now you can speak the language of the robot army and you can tell them what to do. Now you can speak the language of the robot army and you can tell them what to do. Now you can speak the language of the robot army and you can tell them what to do. The robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. The robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. The robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. The robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened.
Coding is something, right?
Ethernet famously coined Metcalfe's law, which is the value of a network is proportional to the square of the number of nodes in the network. If a network of size 10 would have a value of 100, a network of a size 100 would have a value of 10,000. It's not just 10x more, it's 100x more. So you want to be in a network effect business. If you're number one in the network effect business, you win everything. One of the dirty secrets of Silicon Valley is that a lot of the winning businesses are natural monopolies. What is a network effect? Let's just define it precisely. A network effect is when each additional user adds value to the existing user base. So your users themselves are creating some value for the existing users. The classic example that I think everybody can understand is language. Let's say that there's 100 people who live in the community, speak 10 different languages, and each person just speaks one of those 10. you're having to translate all the time. It's incredibly painful. But if all 100 of you spoke the same language, it would add tremendous value. 10 people start out speaking 10 languages, one extra person learns English. Well, now all of a sudden, 11 people know English. So the next person who comes in to learn a new language is probably going to choose English. And at some point, let's say English gets to 20 or 25 people, it's done. It's just going to own the entire language marketplace, and the rest of the languages will get competed out. Network effects are a very powerful concept. When you're picking a business model, it's a really good idea to pick a model where you can benefit from network effects, low marginal costs, and scale economies. And these tend to go together. Like anything that has zero marginal cost of production obviously has scale economies. And things that have zero marginal cost of reproductions very often tend to have network effects because it doesn't cost you anything more to stamp out the thing. So then you can just create little hooks for users to add value to each other. So you should always be thinking about how your users, your customers, can add value to each other, because that is the ultimate form of leverage. You're on the beach in the Bahamas, or you're sleeping at night, and your customers are adding value to each other. We are now living in an age of nearly infinite leverage. Nearly infinite leverage. Nearly infinite leverage. We are now living in an age of nearly infinite leverage. And all the great fortunes are created through leverage. So your first job is to obtain leverage. You can obtain leverage, permission, taking risks, getting people to work for you, or by raising capital, or you can get leverage permissionlessly by learning how to code or becoming a good communicator, podcasting, broadcasting, creating videos, writing, etc., etc., etc. That's how you get leverage. That's how you get leverage. But once you have leverage, what do you do with it? Well, the first part of your career is spent hustling to get leverage. Once you have the leverage, then you want to slow down a bit because your judgment really matters. It's like you've gone from steering your sailboat around to now you're steering an ocean liner or a tanker. You have a lot more at risk, but you have a lot more to gain as well. We are now living in an age of nearly infinite leverage. Nearly infinite leverage. Nearly infinite leverage. We are now living in an age of nearly infinite leverage. You have a lot more at risk, but you have a lot more to gain. So in an age of infinite leverage, judgment becomes the most important skill. My definition of wisdom is knowing the long-term consequences of your actions. Wisdom is just judgment on a personal domain. Wisdom applied to external problems, I think, is judgment. So they're highly linked. It's knowing the long-term consequences of your actions and then making the right decision to capitalize on that. Judgment is very, very hard to build up. This is where both intellect and experience come in play. There are many problems with the so-called intellectuals in the ivory tower. They have no skin in the game. They have no real-world experience, so they just apply purely intellect. And intellect without any experience is often worse than useless, since you get the confidence that the intellect gives you, and you get some of the credibility, but because you had no skin in the game and you had no real experience and no real accountability, you're just throwing darts. The real world is always far, far more complex than we can intellectualize. We are now living in an age of nearly infinite leverage. Nearly infinite leverage. Nearly infinite leverage. We are now living in an age of nearly infinite leverage. You have a lot more at risk, but you have a lot more to gain as well. especially all the interesting, fast-moving edge domains and problems. You can't get there without experience. So if you are smart and you iterate fast, even you put 10,000 hours into something, but you take 10,000 tries at something. If you are smart and you have a lot of quick iterations and you try to keep your emotions out of it, the people with the best judgment are actually among the least emotional. A lot of the best investors are considered almost robotic in that regard. I would be surprised if even the best entrepreneurs come across as unemotional. There is this archetype of the passionate entrepreneur, and yet they have to care about what they're doing, but they also have to see very clearly what's actually happening. The thing that prevents you from seeing what's actually happening are your emotions. Our emotions are constantly clouding our judgment. And in investing or in running companies, building products, or being an entrepreneur, emotions really get in the way. Emotions are what prevent you from seeing what's actually happening until you can no longer resist the truth of what's happening, until it becomes too sudden, and then you're forced into suffering, which is sort of a breaking of this emotional fantasy that you had put together. We are now living in an age of nearly infinite leverage. Nearly infinite leverage. Nearly infinite leverage. We are now living in an age of nearly infinite leverage. You have a lot more at risk, but you have a lot more to gain as well. Investment books are the worst place to learn about investment, because investment is a real-world activity that is highly multivariate. All the advantages are always being competed away. It's always on the cutting edge. So what you actually just need is very, very broad-based judgment thinking. And the best way to do that is to study everything, including a lot of philosophy. And philosophy also makes you more stoic, makes you less emotional. And so you make better decisions, you have better judgment. You can go within someone's feed and get at least some semblance of what it must be like to be in their head all the time. The more outraged somebody is, I guarantee you, the worse their judgment is. If someone's constantly tweeting political outrage, it seems like an angry person getting into fights. You don't want to hand this person the keys to your car, let alone the keys to your company. No one is going to value you more than you value yourself. No one is going to value you more than you value yourself. We're here to talk about wealth creation. That has to be your number one priority. No one is going to value you more than you value yourself. So you just have to set a very high personal hourly rate, and you have to stick to it. Since when I was young, I decided that I was worth a lot more than the market thought I was worth, but I started treating myself that way. So always factor your time into every decision. How much time does it take? Oh, it's going to take me an hour to get across town to get this thing. Well, I value myself at $100 an hour. That's basically throwing $100 out of my pocket. Am I going to do that? You buy something from Amazon, they screwed it up, you have to return it. Is it worth your time to return it? Is it worth the mental hassle? Keep in mind that you have less work hours, you have less mentally high output hours. Do you want to use them to run errands and solve little problems, or do you want to save them for the big stuff? All the great scientists were terrible at managing their household life. None of them had a clean, organized room, or made all their social events on time, or sent their thank you cards. You can spend your life however you want. But if you want to get rich, it has to be your number one overwhelming desire, which means that it has to come before anything else, which means you can't be penny pinching. You can penny pinch your way to a basic sustenance. You can keep your expenses low, maybe retire early and not spend too much, and that's perfectly valid. But we're here to talk about wealth creation. No one is going to value you more than you value yourself. No one is going to value you more than you value yourself. We're here to talk about wealth creation. That has to be your number one priority. No one is going to value you more than you value yourself. So fast forward to your wealthy self and pick some intermediate hourly rate. For me, believe it or not, back when you could have hired me, my hourly rate, I used to say to myself over and over, is $5,000 an hour. Today, when I look back, really it was about $1,000 an hour. And of course, I still ended up doing stupid things like arguing with the electrician or returning the broken speaker, but I shouldn't have. And I did it a lot less than any of my friends would. And I would make a theatrical show out of throwing something in the trash pile or giving it to Salvation Army rather than trying to return it, or handing something to people rather than trying to fix it. I would argue with my girlfriends, and even today to my wife. I don't do that. That's not a problem that I solve. I still argue that with my mother when she hands me like little to-dos. I just don't do that. I would rather hire you an assistant. And this was true even when I didn't have money. And this was true even when I didn't have money. No one is going to value you more than you value yourself. No one is going to value you more than you value yourself. We're here to talk about wealth creation. That has to be your number one priority. No one is going to value you more than you value yourself. Another way of thinking about something is that if you can outsource something or not do something for less than your hourly rate, outsource it or don't do it. Outsource it or don't do it. So if you can hire someone to do it for less than your hourly rate, hire them. And that even includes things like cooking. You may want to eat your healthy home-cooked meals, but if you can outsource it, do that instead. And I know some people will say, well, what about the joy of life and what about getting it right just your way? Sure, you can do that, but you're not going to be wealthy because now you've made something else a priority. Graham basically said it pretty well. You should be working on your product, you should be exercising and eating healthy. That's all you have time for while you're on this mission. So set a very high hourly aspirational rate for yourself and stick to it. And it should seem and feel absurdly high. If it doesn't, it's not high enough. To you would be raise it. And whatever you picked, my advice to you would be raise it. Let's talk about hard work. There's this battle that happens a lot. Should you work hard and should you not? You're slave driving people. All the great founders work their fingers to the bone. And they're talking past each other. First of all, they're talking about two different things. Employees in a lifestyle business, which is fine. Your number one thing in life, if you're doing that, is not getting wealthy. You have a job, you also have your family, you also have your life. But Keith is talking about the Olympics of startups. He's talking about the person going for the gold medal, trying to build a multi-billion-dollar public company. That person has to get everything right. They have to have great judgment. They have to pick the right thing to work on. They have to recruit the right team. And they have to work crazy hard because they're basically engaged in a competitive sprint. So if getting wealthy is your goal, you are going to have to work as hard as you can. If getting wealthy is your goal, you are going to have to work as hard as you can. But hard work is no substitute for who you work with and what you work on. Who you work with and what you work on. and that 3, that should be your overwhelming goal. And you can save yourself a lot of time if you pick the right area to work in. Picking the right people to work with is the next most important piece. And then third comes how hard you work. But they're like 3 legs of a stool. If you shortchange on any one of them, the whole stool is going to fall down. So it's not like you can pick one over the other that easily. So the order of operations when you're building a business or even building your career is first figure out, what should I be doing? What is something where there is a market that is emerging, there's a product that I can build that I'm excited to work on, and something where I have specific knowledge and I'm really into it. And then second, surround yourself with the best people possible. And no matter how high your bar is, raise your bar. Because you can never be working with other people who are great enough. There's someone greater out there to work with, you should go work with them. I advise a lot of people who are looking at which startup to join in Silicon Valley, the one that's going to have the best alumni network for you in the future. Look at the PayPal mafia. They work with a bunch of geniuses, so they all got rich. So just try and pick based on the highest intelligence, energy, and integrity people that you can find. And then finally, once you've picked the right thing to work on and the right people to work with, then you work as hard as you can. Then you work as hard as you can. Hard work is no substitute for who you work with and what you work on. Who you work with and what you work on. Who you work with and what you work on. Hard work is no substitute for who you work with and what you work on. Who you work with and what you work on. Who you work with and what you work on. Where the mythology gets a little crazy. People work 80, 120-hour weeks. A lot of that's just status signaling. It's showing off. Nobody really works 80 to 120 hours a week sustained at high output with mental clarity. Your brain breaks down. You just won't have good ideas. So really the way people tend to work most effectively, especially in knowledge work, is they sprint as hard as they can while they're working on something and they're inspired and they're passionate, and then they rest, they take long breaks. It's more like a lion hunting and much less like a marathon runner running. So you sprint, then you rest, you reassess, and then you try again. Inspiration is perishable. When you have your inspiration, do it right then and there. Inspiration is perishable. When you have your inspiration, do it right then and there. This happens to me a lot with my tweet storm. I've actually come up with a whole bunch of additional tweet storms besides the ones that are already out there, but sometimes I just hesitate or I just pause and then it just dies. And what I've learned is if I'm inspired to write a blog post or to publish a tweet storm, I should probably do it right away. Otherwise, it's not going to get out there. I won't come back to it. Inspiration is perishable. When you have
Inspiration is perishable. When you have your inspiration, do it right then and there.
So inspiration is a beautiful and powerful thing, and when you have it, just seize it. Inspiration is a beautiful and powerful thing, and when you have it, just seize it. Impatience with actions and patience with results. That's actually a good philosophy for life. Anything you have to do, just get it done. Why wait? You're not getting any younger. Your life is slipping away. You don't want to spend it waiting in line, traveling back and forth, doing things that you know ultimately aren't part of your mission. And when you do them, you want to do them as quickly as you can while you do them well with your full attention. But then you just have to give up on the results. You have to be patient with the results because you're dealing with complex systems, you're dealing with lots of people. It takes a long time for markets to adopt products. It takes time for people to get comfortable working with each other. It takes time for great products to emerge as you polish away, 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 polish away.
Inspiration is perishable. When you have your inspiration, do it right then and there. Inspiration is perishable. When you have your inspiration, do it right then and there. 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 Inspiration is perishable. When you have your inspiration, do it right then and there.
If I have a problem that I discover in one of my businesses that needs to be solved, I basically won't sleep until at least the resolution is in motion. And this is just a personal failing, but if I'm on the board of a company, I'll call the CEO. If I'm running the company, I'll call my reports. If I'm responsible, I'll get on there right then and there and solve it. If I don't solve a problem the moment it happens, or I don't start moving towards solving it the moment it happens, I have no peace, I have no rest, I have no happiness until that problem is solved. So solve it as quickly as possible. I literally won't sleep until it's solved. So solve it as quickly as possible. I literally won't sleep until it's solved.
Inspiration is perishable. When you have your inspiration, do it right then and there. Inspiration is perishable. When you have your inspiration, do it right then and there. 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 Inspiration is perishable. When you have your inspiration, do it right then and there.
Characteristic, but it's worked out well in business. We squander our time with the death of 1,000 cuts. We squander our time with the death of 1,000 cuts.
A busy calendar and a busy mind will destroy your ability to do great things in this world. To do great things in this world. You need free time and a free mind to do great things in this world. You need free time and a free mind to do great things in this world.
You should be too busy to do coffee while still keeping an uncluttered calendar. People who know me know that I'm famous for simultaneously doing two things. One is having a very clean calendar. I have almost no meetings on it, while at the same time, I am busy all the time. I'm always doing something. And it's usually quote-unquote work-related. But it is whatever the highest impact thing is that needs to be done at that time and that I'm most interested and inspired about. But the only way to do that is to constantly, ruthlessly decline meetings. People want to do coffee and build relationships. That's fine early in your career when you're still exploring, but later in your career when exploiting and there are more things coming at you than you have time for, you have to ruthlessly cut meetings out of your life. If someone wants to do a meeting, see if you can do it with a phone call instead. If they want to do a phone call, see if they can do it with an email instead. If they want to do it with email, see if they can do it with a text message instead. If they're text messaging, you should probably be ignoring most text messages unless they're true emergencies. One has to be utterly ruthless about dodging meetings. When you do meetings, do walking meetings, do standing meetings, keep them short, keep them actionable, keep them small. Any meeting with 8 people that sit around a conference table, nothing is getting done in that meeting. You're literally just dying 1 hour at a time.
or something valuable. Other busy, interesting people will meet with you. Your calling card has to be, hey, here's what I've done. Here's what I can show you. Let's meet. And I'll be respectful of your time if this is useful to you. And I find that there are very busy, important people who will take your meeting, but you have to come with a proper calling card. All the people who tweet and who email famous or rich people saying, hey, if I could just get one meeting with you, and they're vague about it, they're not going to get anywhere in life. You have to build up the credibility. You have to do the work. You have to have proof of work. If you have proof of work and you truly have something interesting, then you shouldn't hesitate to put it together and send it to somebody. But even then, when you're asking for a meeting, you want to be super actionable about it. Even if you yourself haven't made it yet, you think you're going to make it by going out and networking and doing a whole bunch of meetings, you're probably incorrect. Yes, networking can be important early in your career. And yes, you can get serendipitous with meetings, but the odds are pretty low. Just meeting people and hoping to get that lucky break, you're relying on type 1 luck, which is blind luck, and type 2 luck, which is hustle luck. But what you're not getting is type 3 or type 4 luck, which are the better kinds, where you spend time developing a reputation, working on something, developing a unique point of view, being able to spot opportunities that others can't. A busy calendar and a busy mind will destroy your ability to do great things in this world. To do great things in this world. You need free time and a free mind to do great things in this world. You need free time and a free mind to do great things in this world. A busy calendar and a busy mind will destroy your ability to do great things in this world. To do great things in this world. You need free time and a free mind to do great things in this world. You need free time and a free mind to do great things in this world. If you want to be able to do great things, whether you're a musician, entrepreneur, or you're an investor, you need free time and you need a free mind. If you want to be able to do great things, you need free time and you